Hey there, woodworkers. This is part 4 of our small bookshelf project, and in this video, we'll show gluing together the sides and the shelves. What I've got gathered here is, I have my project, and I have already finished sanded the faces. I've gathered some clamps. I've got it on top of a piece of paper so that glue doesn't drip on my workbench. I've got a bottle of glue, and I made sure that it's full. I've got some Q-tips that I use as glue spreaders, and I always have a mallet nearby when I'm doing assembly as well. When you are gluing together different parts of a wood project, you want to have clamping pressure on the joint area. Ours has 3 shelves that fit into dados, and so I've put clamps in each of those spots. Underneath, I have some I-beam style bar clamps that are nice for our project to sit on. And then I've got some F-style bar clamps that will then go on top of each shelf as well. I also like to have an extra long clamp available because at the end of the glue up, we're gonna check for square and make sure that our case is square. And if it's not, then I'll need a long clamp like that to help pull it into square. Typically, you want to have a helper with you when you're doing an assembly like this. But if not, just make sure that you have everything perfectly prepared so that you can do your assembly as quickly and successfully as possible. Once you start adding glue to a project, you can't really undo it. So you do want to make sure that you're totally ready at this point to move forward. You also want to keep in mind what type of glue you're using and what open time that glue has. I'm using Titebond 3, so I can work with this for about 10 minutes. So as long as I get my project together and clamped in 10 minutes or less, then I'll be okay. All right, let's get started. You can see that I've taken some scrap material and cut myself some clamping cauls, and I've just double-sided taped those to my project. And that's where my clamps are gonna go. And so if there's any denting that happens, then it dents my cauls rather than denting my nice project. Okay, I'm gonna put a small bead of glue in each of my dados, and then I'm gonna use a Q-tip to kind of wipe that around. I don't need to cover 100% with the glue, so don't worry too much about that. I just want to spread the glue over most of the area, and then as we clamp it together, then the glue will go into those other areas. We do wanna be a little bit careful with how much glue we use, because if there's any excess glue that squeezes out or drips out, then we'll need to clean that up with some water. Okay, I've got my shelves nearby. I've got this laid out, and I'm ready to begin the glue up. Okay, small bead of glue in each of my dados. I just kind of wiggle the Q-tip back and forth. You want it to get a little bit on the walls of the dado and a little bit on the floor of the dado. You could use like a small paintbrush for this as well. Oh, I forgot glue over here. Okay. You may have specifically decided which shelf goes where or which side is the front and back. And if that's so, then make sure you put it together that way. I didn't necessarily choose them to be in any certain order, so I'm going to be putting them in. Now, as I place these in, I want them to be flush to the front as best as possible. Okay, once you've got these in, then we'll take our other piece and place it on top. This is the part where a mallet is handy. If you have any joints that are a little bit too tight, you can tap them into place. If you've got a shelf that's a little bit too proud one way or the other, you can kind of knock it around. Okay, now that it's together like this, I'm gonna carefully tip it to its side on our clamps. And I'm careful that my clamps are lined up with my shelves so that they're gonna be clamping on those cauls. Okay, I'm going to apply some slight pressure, just enough to snug it into place, and I'll add more pressure a little bit later. Okay, you can kind of double check. This one needs to come just a little forward. That's good enough. Okay, now that you have just some slight pressure on those, we're going to bring our F-clamps over. Now, these ones have quite a bit of space, but I don't want to drop them all the way down. I actually want to keep them as high as possible. So I'm going to be putting those kind of towards the front of the shelf and snug that up. Okay, on my tops, I'm going to give that my full clamping pressure, and then I'm going to go back to the bottom and add a little bit more pressure down there as well. Okay, so this is clamped now. Now there's a few things that we want to do while the glue is still wet. We do want to take note of anywhere that there is squeeze out. Now, if there's squeeze out up top like this, then we still want to take care of it, but that could be handled pretty easily with a sander later on. But specifically, if there's any squeeze out in any of these interior corners, then that's most easily dealt with right now. So you'd get a cup of water and a couple of paper towels, and you want to get that paper towel not just damp, but actually wet, and you want to come in and scrub. And so you want to wash, not only wipe, you want to wash and make sure that that glue residue is completely gone. Otherwise, it'll show up when you apply finish. The other thing that we want to do is we want to check this for square. So I'm going to use my tape measure. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure from this interior corner to this interior corner. And the same thing over here, diagonally, and those should match up. So you get a tape measure, and again, this is usually easiest with a friend helping. And it doesn't matter which line I start on as long as I do it the same on both sides. So I'm going to put my little number, my 3-inch line perfectly in that interior corner. And I'm going to stretch it over here and see what my reading says. And it's giving me 26.5. Now, if I come over this other way and set it up the exact same way, this is giving me 26.5. So this happens to be perfectly square, which is what I'm going for. However, if it wasn't square, if I measured those and one was longer than the other, then on that long side, we would want to pull it in a little closer. So in that instance, what you would do is use a clamp like this, put it in diagonally, You'd want to make sure that it's gripping down below on the actual clamp, not on the project itself. And then you'd give some slight pressure and you're pulling that long diagonal in. For example, if this was 1/4 of an inch longer than this, then I would need to pull this in 1/8 of an inch, and then it would add 1/8 of an inch to this one, and it would even those measurements out. Like I said, mine happened to be the same, which is ideal. If you've milled everything correctly and assembled it correctly, then it should come in nice and square. So the last thing I'm gonna do is just get some water and touch up these extra glue spots. Okay, I've brought over some wet paper towels, and you can see these are dripping wet. And I just wanna make sure any area that I see any glue residue, I am scrubbing that out, flushing it out as best I can. Some people like to use a toothbrush as well, works really good for this. If you've got a cup of water and an old toothbrush, then it can work well in those corners as well. Okay, I've cleaned up all my excess glue and I'm ready to just let this sit in the clamps. I like to write my name and then the time that I got it in the clamps and the time that I want to take it out of the clamps. You want your project to be clamped for 45 minutes. So, put my name. I got this clamp together about 5 minutes ago, so 9:30, and then 45 minutes later would be 10:15. Making a note like that's nice because then you know exactly how long to wait, or if you walk away from your project and another student is near your project, then they could easily see if it's okay for them to take your project out of the clamps or not. So I'll come back in 45 minutes. Okay, it's been 45 minutes, so I'm gonna take this out of the clamps. The next step is you want to just give a visual inspection over your whole project. And if there happens to be any glue spots or anything that doesn't look correct, then now would be a good time to make any of those changes or adjustments. If you need to use a little chisel to get rid of any glue spots and things like that. So we're just gonna do a little touch up and inspection. The next thing is gluing on our feet as well. I'm gonna include that in this video as well, because it's just a quick one. Our feet just slide onto these rabbets that we've created at the bottom. So I'm just gonna put a little bit of glue in the groove on the feet. I'll set it in place, and then for this, I'm actually gonna shoot a nail into the bottom just to hold that in place. The glue is what's gonna give it the strength, but the nail is what will hold it in place so that I don't need to clamp it while it's drying. So let me show you that. I've made a few marks that I'm going to use to put my nail through so that I know that the nail is going to go into the side and not be sticking out. I'll use one of the Q-tips that I had before and just put a small amount in each of these grooves. Okay. I'm going to slide this into place. I'm going to slide it into place. There is a line on this nail gun that kind of shows where the nail is going to come out. So that's what I am aiming with. Okay, no exposed nails, so that's good. And no exposed nails, so that's good as well. Now that my feet are attached, that glue is still wet. So if you need to do any touch-ups, then now would be a good time. And just to make sure that these feet are going to sit totally flat, I'm going to set my project up on the feet and allow it to dry standing as it will be. So that's the end of this video, doing our first and main assembly for this project. The other assembly is once we finish the pieces on the back and once we finish the piece on the top as well. And we'll cover those in the next few videos.